Welcome to the Unpacking It podcast with Bryce Johnson. It's a show that unpacks sports, faith, and life with intriguing guests from the sports and entertainment world. Enjoy inspiring conversations and thought-provoking interviews. You'll hear stories from people that will inspire, challenge, and encourage you. Now, from the Unpacking It studios in Charlotte, North Carolina, uniting sports fans everywhere, here is Bryce Johnson.
And joining us right now is broadcaster Brian Anderson. He is a play-by-play announcer for Turner Sports, calling games for the NCAA tournament, NBA, MLB, and golf. He is also the TV play-by-play announcer for the Milwaukee Brewers. In college at St. Mary's University, he played catcher on a nationally ranked baseball team. He is also a husband and a father. I'm pleased to be joined by Brian Anderson today on Unpacking It. Brian, thanks so much for coming back on the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, Bryce. Always good to be with you, man. Congratulations on all your success.
Man, well, I appreciate it. God continues to open up doors for the show, and so we're excited and thankful for sure. Well, let's start in the NBA because as an NBA announcer, I'm just curious what your thoughts have been regarding all the movement in the league this summer.
Yeah, it's been stunning, right? I mean, it's directly affected me because we went down and taped a golf event with 8 NBA players matching up against 8 NFL players. And so we went down there, and Chris Paul is one of the captains, so the whole show is full of me saying Houston Rockets point guard Chris Paul. Oh. And 2 days after the event, when we finished recording everything, he gets traded. Oh. So we had to go in and recut a lot of the audio. We had to do some surgery on the post-production, a little post-op, cutting out all the areas where I said Houston Rockets and, just called him by either point guard or future Hall of Famer. So, yeah, I think there was it's been interesting. I mean, I'm fascinated by Kawhi going to the Clippers. I think most people felt like he was going to end up in L.A. I think most people felt like he might end up with the Lakers. But the fact that the Clippers are this team on the rise right now, and the Lakers have some issues, I think that made sense to me once it all went down. I felt like Kawhi might stay in Toronto just because of how things went there, and he's beloved there, obviously, won a championship. But I understand you get to free agency and you want to be able to go where you want. These players, for so long in their careers, have no choice, and very few get to the point where they can play, live, work where they want. And Kawhi did that, so good for him. And I don't begrudge any player going back home or going anywhere he chooses to go. So it's been a lot of news and it's been fun to follow.
Absolutely, no, I've loved it. It's been fun as a fan. And then so for you, this kind of upcoming season, what's kind of your perspective? Because to me, it seems like now there will be a lot more teams playing on national TV, and so you'll be calling probably even more, variety of teams instead of, it's Warriors every week. It's not necessarily going to be that way. Is that kind of how you view it? And do you enjoy that aspect of it where really there's probably 10 teams that are championship contenders?
Yeah, I think the league does a pretty good job at dispersing those national games. I mean, they're, Turner Sports, so TNT is who I work for on the NBA side, and they have say. But it's really what the NBA, the teams they want to showcase and when they want to showcase those games. And, they groom the schedule to fit into those, in Turner's case, TNT's case, the Thursday night window, or later in the second half, the Tuesday, Thursday night window. So, I put that on the league a little bit, and I do think they have a lot more options. Obviously, the league wants more parity. There is a great debate whether a dynasty team is better for the league than a lot of parity. So, you could make the argument both ways, I think. But I think this year, certainly there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be intriguing to watch. I'm always pulling for more Milwaukee Bucks games because I live in Milwaukee. So if I can get the Bucks and the Bulls, playing at the top shelf level, then I don't necessarily have to get on an airplane that much, which is, it's all about my selfish interest,
right,
Bryce, at some point. So if
sense.
I can just drive down to Fiserv Forum and do a bunch of Bucks games, I'm I'm all for that. But no, I think we're all, Kevin Harlan lives in Kansas City. I live in Milwaukee. We're kind of in the middle of the country. Marv lives in New York, and he obviously is going to do the marquee games whenever they come up. So we have a good group that can get anywhere, anytime, and we're always happy to do that.
Man, those three are studs for sure. Brian Anderson, our guest right now on Unpacking It, broadcaster for Turner Sports, as well as the voice of the Milwaukee Brewers on TV. And so you mentioned wanting more Bucks games, and I know you're kind of joking about that, but I was going to ask you, how has your kind of sports fandom changed since becoming a broadcaster? Now, of course, you still get excited about calling games and you love sports, but how has it changed? And like, what teams did you grow up rooting for and cheering for, and how has that changed over the years?
Well, it totally changes once you get in the business, and the old saying, you see how the sausage is made. It kind of changed your taste for hot dogs, right? So that's the case with broadcasting and doing this as a profession. I grew up a huge sports fan, and I was a big follower of the Houston Oilers and the Astros and the Rangers. I kind of rooted for all Texas teams. I was a big Texas Longhorns fan growing up in Austin, Texas. So I had my teams. I actually really liked the Yankees. The Yankees felt like they were on every Saturday, the game of the week, back in those days with Vin Scully and Joe Garagiola. So I loved Don Mattingly, so I became kind of a Texan Yankee fan, which is odd back then.
Yeah.
But that was the team I was exposed to the most. So, but once I started working in the game, you realize it's a different level. You're here to do a job, and you stop being such a fan like that. Like, I would not just go to a game and take my family and park and tailgate, and I wouldn't do that. I think that's awesome, and I think people should do that, but I go to so many games. A fun afternoon for me or evening for me is to sit on my couch and watch a World Series game or a big college football game or an NFL game. You know what I mean? So I'm away and in stadiums so much, in arenas so much. I'd rather just be at home when I can, just because of what I do for a living. So that really changes things. So I love following the Green Bay Packers. I'm a fan of theirs. I actually, over the last 3 years, I started latching on to the Premier Soccer League, the Premier League. And I have a friend of mine who has a connection with the Liverpool team, and as you know, they just won the UFC, and it's a pretty cool thing to be associated with. I took a trip there 3 years ago and just fell in love with the sport. And what I tell people is, I can actually be a raw fan of Premier League because I know nothing about the sport. I don't know how to broadcast it for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know the ins and outs of what makes one team better than the other, aside from athleticism. So I can just kind of go in blind and cheer for that team and not really be so invested in, all the ins and outs as a broadcaster would, all the prep that we do and the work that we do. So that's actually been kind of fun. It kind of reminded me when I was a fan, when I was a kid, of the Oilers and Earl Campbell and Dan Pastorini in that group, and the Astros when the Killer Bees were there, going to games in the Astrodome. I was a kid. It reminded me of that, and I felt like that again. So actually, I've kind of stopped being a fan of most of the sports except for the Premier League right now, which is interesting because I despised soccer for so many years.
Oh, man.
I was one of those guys that made fun of soccer, like, I can't watch this. This is not interesting. But then I saw a game in person, and then I realized the art of it, the beauty of it, and it's not just about goal scoring, it's about runs. And now you can kind of appreciate, oh, wow, okay, I get why people are into this at this level.
That's cool. That's awesome perspective from Brian Anderson with us right now on Unpacking It. And you mentioned fans being on the couch watching sports. And so that's where I'm at during March Madness. That's where I'm at during the NBA playoffs and listening to you and watching your games. And we're halfway through 2019, but you've already called some memorable games and big moments. So far for you, what has been most memorable? And I know a couple games come to mind, Virginia, Purdue, and Blazers and Thunder, but where do you come out on that?
Yeah, those are the two. I mean, for sure. Those are right at the top of the list, just watching. I mean, all of Purdue's games that I had in working for Big Ten Network, Purdue just had one of those seasons where just, I don't know, some teams, some years it just feels like you have so many highlights with that team and so many moments to call. And Purdue they had a great run, and I was lucky enough to be there for that on a national level for the NCAA tournament. So that's certainly up there. I think watching the Nuggets, kind of seeing them develop throughout the year and having them a couple of times, and then to see them make a run in the playoffs and beat the Spurs, and I called Game 7 of that series, and the dramatic Blazers Oklahoma City game with Damian Lillard hitting that 37-footer, which I was fortunate enough to call.
Yeah,
and,
oh yeah.
You feel lucky when you're in those moments because you know you're going to call games, but most games don't have memorable finishes like that.
Mm-hmm.
You feel lucky and you feel a little anxious and nervous when you're doing those. You don't want to ruin those moments either, and that's just the cool part of this job, to kind of step back and say, wow, and for me it's always like the humble approach. I thank the Lord, like, thank you for putting me here, and now please don't let me mess this up. But I've had some mistakes throughout the years, and you never want to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but it happens, and so that's the other part of it too. It's like, all right, I got to learn from that and be better, do that better, call that sequence better, and that's the way we get better. We don't try not to let it beat us down, but we also don't let those great moments let us get too cocky and get to a position where we think we are above all of it, because just being in the moment, appreciating the opportunity to be in that moment, that's where I'm constantly wrestling to be mentally when I'm calling these games. So when it's over and you look back, it's not like you're saying, well, that's my favorite game I've ever called. It never feels like that, ever. Because it feels like, during the Roy Halladay no-hitter in 2010, you knew it was just like it was something special. And everybody said, well, yeah, that must have been a blast. It was not a blast. It was hard, and there was a lot of anxiety, and you're trying not to mess it up, and this is like a historical moment that could happen, and then it does happen, and then you do a good job with it, and then it's great. Then you can relax. But thinking about it, I still have memories and feelings and anxiety about. I can put myself right in that. The smells, the sights, the position in the booth, and it's uncomfortable, because which is not bad. Yeah. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Yeah. I think that's a good place to be. Is a little bit on edge, I've talked to like Navy SEALs, I'm not comparing my job to a Navy SEAL, but being stretched like that does bring you to a level of concentration. Now, when your life's on the line, that's different. But I understand that mentality because when you are stretched and you're trying to do a good job and you're in the middle of it, you do feel stretched, and it's not a comfortable place, and you're trying to make it comfortable. And then when you finish, if your training has worked and you've kept your mind clear, then you feel good about that. If you don't, then you got to learn from that and get better.
No, it's really neat to hear about. And I even just think about, how you're feeling and what you're thinking about kind of the moments before the final call, because they always take the camera and they go right to you and your analyst. And all right, what's going to happen on this final play? And you can hear the crowd and the energy. And that's a big time moment. So that's cool to hear a little insight from Brian Anderson with us right now on Unpacking It. And Brian, you talk about some of these big calls that you've had, and your notoriety continues to grow in the broadcasting business, and it's been fun to kind of watch your career really take off. But you mentioned the word humble and humility. What is your perspective on success and fame and kind of the way that you've seen your career grow? How do you handle that? How do you handle some of the changes that have taken place over the years?
Well, it's not. I think the easy cliche and what you hear a lot is you got to remain grounded, and that's true. But I think you have to work at it also. And I'm not perfect. I fall victim to that a lot. I think social media feeds into that a lot, good and bad. We all love to hear the praise and read the praise if we do a great job, and the negative stuff that comes out, it wounds us. It's hard to stay above it. And if anybody ever tells you that, oh, I don't listen to that, I don't care what people think, first of all, that's a lie. Everybody cares what people think, and we're made to care. Like we care. We want. That doesn't mean we have to follow that rabbit hole and then make it engulf us. but we are made to care because we should care, and we want to care about what our impact is on people, what role we're having. So for me, there's like all these layers of it. There's the public side, which me calling a game, you being an audience absorbing it. Then there's also the big picture side, like me and my career and my family and supporting my family and, earning a living to pay my mortgage and pay for my daughter's education and all of that. So that's a different thing, which adds different pressure. And then there's the piece where you're in it with your coworkers and the place where you are and where you've been placed. I like to say, at least, in my opinion, my faith angle is like I've been placed in this position, and you have to serve the people you work with well, your analyst, your audio guy, your producer, your director, the camera operators, everybody. And now, what kind of person are you? Are you working hard, taking the time to know their stories, appreciate their craft, their art, know their background? You can't do that with everybody, but, there are moments when you can sit and add 10 more layers of prep, or you can talk to a guy that has been with you for an entire playoff run who may be on the other side of the camera and find out what his life's been about and what his challenges are and what his successes are. And so for me, there's that balance. And as long as I'm staying in that now moment, I shouldn't have time to think about my place in this industry, any kind of notoriety, what they're going to say about me when I'm gone. It's hard not to think that way. I'm not saying I'm perfect. It's hard not to think that way, but the second that thought comes in, doesn't mean we have to give that thought life. And that goes for a lot of things, but especially when it's something that is concerning you, or maybe the selfish instincts that we all have. I mean, we all go there. We all want the publicity and the positive publicity and people to like us. But if you stay kind of focused in the now on serving everybody else, then you really don't have time to do that. And honestly, you shouldn't have time to think big picture that way, because there's always somebody, something to serve in a better way. And that's kind of the way I've gone about it. And that really changed for me when I found Christ, when I was in the late 90s, when I was a young guy, and my thinking was the opposite. It's all about me, and I've got to be the one that makes all this happen. And the performance I'm giving, or the job I'm doing, is totally on me at all times, and everybody else can just take a side seat or a back seat until I'm finished. And that changed on a dime. And then not until that changed for me mentally and my approach did anything happen in my career. So I know I'm at my best, even though it's a risky place to go, to say to yourself, I could spend the next 10 minutes studying more, or I could walk across the court and shake hands with somebody that works with us that I don't know yet, and let them know how much I appreciate what they're doing, and find out a little bit why they're here and what got them to this level. So that's important to me, and I want to know people, and I want to know why people are where we are. We're all working together as a crew usually, or anybody who's there. So that's really important to me, and that's kind of what I try to explain to young broadcasters. And it's really hard, though, because I certainly wasn't going to hear that when I was young and starting out. It's all about the selfish approach and how I'm going to make this happen. But that's really the wisdom from the Lord, really, that I've been able to put in play. And things have happened in my career that I don't have an explanation for. I don't feel like I deserve any of this, So I just keep doing what I do and trying to serve as many people as I can. And wherever that lands, I need to be okay with it. Sometimes I try to force it my way, still do, even at 48 years old. For the most part, I'm trying to serve people every day.
Amen. Oh, I love that. And really that wisdom and that truth translates to all of our lives, regardless of what our profession is. Just being open to serve others and to be aware of what others are doing and how they're feeling and what they may need in that moment. So really love that perspective. Brian Anderson, our guest right now on Unpacking It, broadcaster for Turner Sports. You see him on NBA coverage, NCAA tournament, Major League Baseball, and love having him with us here on Unpacking It. And so along those same lines that you were kind of talking about, and taking maybe a little step further in regards to your willingness to be outspoken about your faith, what is your approach to that, and what are even some of the challenges of that as you interact with people and as you represent yourself to people, and you're well known as a broadcaster and all that sort of thing. But what is your strategy, I guess, in being obedient to the Lord, but also understanding your role as a broadcaster and interacting with a lot of people?
Well, I don't think you can take a wide angle on that and say, this is my philosophy, this is how I'll do it. I think it has to be case by case, and talking to you, or if I'm being asked, or if I'm in the public at an appearance. If I'm in an appearance for the Brewers, or making an appearance at a golf event for Turner, representing Turner Sports, that's not a pulpit for me to give my opinions. I'm being paid to be there, and I have a job to do, and I'm representing the organization, and I try to do it to my best ability. But if I get it offered to speak at a church, or wherever, I don't know where it may be, but you have to take each case and say, okay, if I get asked, I'm always willing to talk about it, always, and my faith and my walk, and especially now in the political climate we're in, because a movement that is not Christian, and they are aligning themselves with Christianity that's not proper, in my opinion. And so you have to be very careful what you're going to represent when you say that you're a Christian. And I want people to know that I believe in Jesus, and I believe in a God, in a just God too. But I don't necessarily believe in all the things that you hear from pastors even, and from those claiming the name of Jesus and claiming Christianity for political gain. So I'm not in on that, and I don't believe that. I don't believe a lot of things that people are claiming right now in the name of Jesus. So that's a hard thing to reconcile, because becoming a much more divided country, and I'm a broadcaster who's doing sporting events, right?
That's right.
So it's not for me to be on the air and give my opinions on bigger picture things like that. Charles Barkley can do it because he's paid to do that. I'm a play-by-play announcer.
True.
I'm not paid to give my opinions. If I want to pursue that down the road, maybe I will, but right now that's not where I am in my life. So, there is a fine line there, and for me it's a pretty clear line of when to talk about my faith and my perspective and my opinions, and when not to. And when I'm working, when I'm on the job, when I'm covering a game, that's not the time to do it. Now, when I'm asked about it, walking through the arena or doing interviews like this, I'm more than happy to do that if I'm asked. But if I'm not asked, then I'm not just going to unsolicited offer my opinions.
It makes sense. It's a good approach. Brian Anderson, our guest right now on Unpacking It. And you've talked a little bit about this, but the last time you joined us on the show, you talked about how you want to be an encourager. So even not necessarily, you got to be outspoken every minute, but the fact that you can love people well and be an encourager to people day in, day out. What does that look like practically? And how can you be, how can you encourage our listeners today to kind of implement a similar strategy as far as being an encourager to others?
Well, I do think, you hear a lot, well, that's, your spiritual gifts are X, Y, Z, and I've been told before that, your spiritual gift is as an encourager. And I don't know if I'm in on that. I don't know if I buy that, that the Lord is creating us. I do think, obviously, that we have our gifts and things we are good at and our passions and the things we want to pursue. I think that is laced by the Lord. I believe that, but I do think, for me, I feel better when, first of all, I see people in their best way. So when I see somebody who has a little spark of an ability to do a certain thing, whether it be play the drums or speak in front of a microphone or a dancer or whatever, there's so many people that are telling all of those people that you can't, and I've been there and I've been told I can't, that there aren't enough saying you can. And wow, I saw this. So if it's authentic and it's true and I see something, and I'm going to say it. So I'm going to tell somebody. Like I just had a conversation the other day with this woman who is a broadcaster, and she's at a crossroads in her career, and I see excellence in her, but she's not there yet. So I can be honest about that. But she's not hearing that part. She's only hearing about the mistakes and the issues and the problems that she may be running into, the challenges. She's not hearing like, wow, but in the middle of all that, there's excellence. And so if I see that and I have access to that person, I point to express that, because I don't think enough people do that. And I don't think that's just because I've been gifted the ability to be an encourager. I just think because I wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
I didn't used to do that when I was growing up. I didn't do that. But as I've matured and as I've aged and as I've looked at the world, and probably because I went through a period as a young broadcaster where all you hear is negativity. All you hear is, well, you're not good enough. You don't have a deep enough voice. All these things that, are just coming at you, is like whenever somebody would say a positive word, it was just like salve for the wound, and I latched onto that. So maybe that's why I feel so strongly about that, because when I don't make it up either. So the other part is there can be people that are kind of full of it, and they just spray all this positive nonsense on people, but it's not authentic.
Sure.
And I think people can sniff that out, and that's not what I do. I mean, if I don't have great things to say, or I don't believe you can be a Major League Baseball announcer, I'm not going to say you can, in my opinion. I'm going to say, no, here's why you can't, here's how you can. That's kind of my take on encouraging people, and especially on Twitter and social media. There's just not enough of it. I mean, The history of the world has always been, the old saying, squeaky wheels gets the grease. It's always been a critical nature. Criticism is easy to publish and easy to spew. It makes us feel better in a dark way. And so I've tried to avoid that and eliminate that, even when I'm just talking with my friends. And don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here saying that I do everything right, but in a public forum and talking to people that I'm around, I want them to know what I see in them. And I do have some expertise in some areas that I can help, and I try to do that whenever I can.
Man, no, it's such an encouragement to hear that, and just to really just be aware of it, to be intentional about encouraging others, people we work with, people we interact with throughout the day, and just being thankful in many ways, but then encouraging them and seeing something good in them and letting them know, not just thinking it to ourselves, but actually verbally telling them, hey, you did a great job with this, or you're great at this, and man, it can make a difference in someone's life, and really the trajectory of their life can change in many ways just from an encouraging word. It's that powerful. So good stuff from Brian Anderson here on Unpacking It. He's a broadcaster for Turner Sports and covers basketball and baseball and golf and does a little bit of everything and does a great job with it. I always love to hear from our guests what God has been maybe doing in your life recently. What's he been teaching you? What's something that maybe you've been studying most recently? What's been on your heart, Brian?
Well, I think, really for the first time in my career at this level, I dealt with a lot of hardship coming up, made it to a certain level, and then kind of had a smoother ride for a while. And then there's been a few bumps on the way. So I think, I don't know if it's all by design. I have no idea. I don't know if I could back that up with Scripture. But I do know it's an area that, I need to improve upon, is how I deal with any kind of scenario that's not working to my advantage in my career. How much stake am I putting in my career? I'm getting older now. I'm almost 50, so I've got 2 years until my 50th birthday. What does my career look like? I've been thinking about this a lot as Bob Ueckers talked about the end of his career, and we saw Vin Scully retire, and Marv Albert is, potentially leaving at some point over the next handful of years. And so my generation is kind of being asked to replace all these legends. That's a hard place to be. And so on one hand, you're like, yeah, why not me? And then on the other hand, I'm kind of thinking, well, why me? And so, I'm in that position right now. So that's really what I've been diving into with Scripture and with my faith walk is how should I think about the next steps, trying to replace that worry and anxiety with thankfulness. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about just staying in the now and trying to serve people where you are right now. And we're empty nesters now, my wife and I. So these are all things that, you start thinking about the world in a totally different way when your kid goes to college.
Wow.
So I'm trying to not go so far that way and trying to stay more in like today. What's today have to offer? What's this week have to offer? What can I be, and how can I be a better husband, father, broadcaster, coworker, all of that. And so it takes a real discipline to stay in that now, and I fail at that more than I want to. So that's kind of where I'm at in my walk.
Oh, man, that's awesome. And I want to ask you, too, and we'll maybe end it on this note. You mentioned your daughter going off to college. Now, I'm on the other side of things. My wife is due with our first child, and it's a daughter, and her name is actually Maddie. And so I understand your daughter, she goes by Madeline?
She's a Maddie. Madeline's her name. She goes by Maddie. And you're like you totally are in the next phase, which is when you start thinking about your life in phases, it's so weird because we never think about that like when we're kids, right? And so now you are, and you're going to have those anxieties. I'd say especially for you right now, just the thoughts of a potential high school graduation one day, college, marriage. They're so far off, and yet they create so much anxiety in a dad's life, and that'll never stop. So it's a great ride. Enjoy the ride, and congratulations on that. And it's a completely, you'll be able to understand why you get so much advice right now, because those of us who have lived through it, we wish we'd have probably done it better or different, and so that's our only way we can cope is we just start bombarding new parents with advice, which I'm always trying to be aware of and say, I need to stop talking to these people about how raising a child.
No.
Because you're going to have to just go through it, man. It's your walk and your perspective. I do believe in mentoring. I do believe we don't tap into the older generation enough. For me, tapping into somebody who is, my parents' age and above, and for you, somebody my age. You know what? We don't do that enough. That was a sacred thing back in Hebrew days. And, the Old Testament's full of that mentoring and passing down, and I don't think we do that enough. I think we get stuck in our own holes and our own world, and we kind of just lose sight of the path that others have walked in front of us. And we're going to be upset about that when one day we realize that the kids behind us, if we don't keep this going, they're going to be totally ignorant to what path you walked for your daughter, right? Because they're learning by example, and we're ignoring the path that those ahead of us walked in older generations. And so that's a huge problem with our society, and we can't fix all of society, but we can fix ourselves, and we can make sure we're not going to be those kind of people.
No, it's good. And actually, I've been desiring the advice and the wisdom. And so I've been asking my guests recently for that advice. So I appreciate it. And that's a good word from Brian Anderson. So, man, Brian, so great to catch up with you. Really appreciate you being a part of the show today, and just love the work that you do on the floor or as a broadcaster. And but more importantly, appreciate your heart and just your encouragement to me today and to all of our listeners. So thanks so much.
All right, Bryce. Always great to be with you, man. God bless you.
For more information about the show, our events, and other resources, visit unpackinit.com. That's unpackinit.com. We hope you are encouraged, inspired, and challenged by what you heard today. To support our show and Unpacking It Ministries with a financial gift, visit unpackinit.com/donate. We look forward to unpacking sports, faith, and life with you again next week.